Are you ready to make the cutest, fiercest dinosaur headed towel? Me too. Get you a towel, a hand towel, some felt pieces for the accessories, and go download your pattern. You can find it on bellebyjessi.com. That's Belle by Jessi. There's an extra E on the Belle, not on the Jessi. Download your pattern and meet me back here. We'll get it cut out and sewn together. Let's start on our dinosaur headed towel. I've downloaded my pattern and instructions, and I've gathered all my materials. So I'm going to take the sewing instructions and set them to the side, which leaves me with my pattern pieces. I'm going to trim these out, get them ready to cut out of fabric. I'm going to point out one thing first. Your hood pattern is too big for one piece of paper, so you'll see it split onto two pieces. There are directions on the pattern piece, but I'm also just going to tell you, you're going to trim the whole piece out, match those dotted lines up together, and then just tape it so you'll have your whole hood piece as one pattern piece. Then with the small pieces that we're going to cut out of felt, I will show you a little trick I like to do with these little tiny pieces that makes it a little bit easier to cut them. But for starters, let's get our paper scissors and trim these out. All right, we have all of our pattern pieces trimmed out. My hood is taped together, so I have the one correct size piece. My smaller pieces are all going to be cut out of felt. And of course, you can take your felt and your pattern piece and pin it on as you're probably used to doing. So let's see, let's pin this one real quick. This is my spike. I'm going to need several of them. And I'll get it pinned and ready to trim out my first pair. So this is probably how you typically cut out your pattern pieces, which is fine. I actually come from a production background. I used to be a production pattern maker, meaning that I created the patterns that the factory workers would use to sew things to sell. So sometimes I do things a little bit differently. Pinning is one of the things I frequently do differently. If there's a way to avoid pinning things down, that is what I will choose because it's oftentimes a little bit quicker. So I'll show you with the hood how we can do that here in just a moment. But with smaller pieces, our paper sometimes will slide around on the fabric. So a little trick I like to do is to trace my pattern piece onto a paper towel. Paper towel has a little bit of texture and it kind of stays put so it doesn't slide around as much. So what I'm going to do very quickly is trace off my eye and my teeth pieces onto the paper towel, and I'm going to use that to cut out my felt. One more thing, typically for my dinosaur, for the colored part of the eye, I usually use brown. I couldn't find brown felt this time, so I looked through my stash and I'm going to use tan, so I like brown. If you want to substitute black or a color, really anything will work. The thing that's so adorable about these hooded towels is that any color combination ends up looking completely adorable. So you substitute what works best for you if you can't find the color you were originally hoping for. another little trick, if you're cutting more of the same fabric or the same thing out of fabric, once you've cut one, you can now use this as your pattern piece. Same thing, it's not going to slide around. So I need 6 total of these little spikes. I've folded my felt over and cut 2. I'm going to use these as my pattern pieces to cut 2 more sets. So I have all of my face accessories here. I've got my eyes, I've got all my teeth, and I've got all my spikes here. I'm going to push these to the side. And we're going to cut the hood next. So we need our hand towel for this. Your hand towel is what you're going to use to make the hood of your towel. So a lot of times hand towels, almost all the time I suppose, will have this sort of decorative little stripe design on one end. Sometimes it'll be on 2 ends. You choose if you want that in your hood or if you want to avoid it. Whenever possible, I like to avoid it so that my towel is just plain terry without any of the extra stuff, because I've got all these accessories I'm putting on it anyway. But just pointing that out before you fold it. What you're going to do is fold your hand towel in half, or I'm going to fold it not exactly in half. I'm going to fold it from the edge to that stripe design and see if that's going to be wide enough for my hood. Yep, that's going to work for mine. So on your hood pattern, you will see right here you have a mark for the fold. So where you have folded your towel, you have a fold line here. This edge is going to line up with that fold. And then you'll also notice that you have a finished edge on your hand towel, factory finished edge that's not going to ravel. We don't want to cut that. We want to use that. That's less work for us. So again, on your pattern, you'll see a marking down here at the bottom. This edge is going to go right on top of this finished towel edge. So this corner is going to butt right up to the corner of your towel where you have it folded over. Now, same thing here. If you're more comfortable pinning, if that's what you're used to doing, that's fine. Pin it down, trim it out. I like to avoid pinning whenever possible. So, in a factory or in a sample room setting, we would use a pattern weight to hold this down to trim around it. You can purchase pattern weights. They're metal. They're typically long, they're flat, and they have a little handle on top of them. An easier option if you want to buy something for this purpose to use at home is if you can find one of these old metal irons. They're great. They're heavy. They have a handle. The only thing you have to watch out for when you're shopping for one is to make sure that the bottom is still nice and smooth so that it doesn't snag your fabric or tear up your pattern piece. So that works great. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter. Anything heavy will work. A small book, your tape dispenser, if you have some extra scissors that are heavy, something heavy on top of it just to hold it still while you trim it around will save you the time and energy of pinning it and then taking those pins out to put them back. But you cut it out however you're comfortable. We're going to trim this hood out and then we're going to start sewing it all together. Let's head to the sewing machine and put this together. The first thing we're going to do is prepare our teeth. So each tooth is going to be 2 layers just stitched together to give it a little bit more body. So of course you can pin the 2 layers together. I'm going to skip that step. We're going to edge stitch as close as we can all around the sharp and the little side edges of the tooth. The top edge, the top flat edge does not have to be stitched right now. And they are sort of shaped like a baseball diamond on purpose. That little flat part is going to let you put the teeth right up beside each other, so keep that shape to it. We're going to edge stitch all of them and then we're going to sew them together in a line. If there's anything on it that doesn't look just exactly how you want it for one, that's fine, but if you want to correct it, you can just trim it off. Felt does not ravel, so we don't have to worry about the edges raveling. That's why we like to use it, and we're just making 2 layers, again, to give it a little bit more body. So we're going to do this to all the other teeth. Alright, I have all 6 teeth edge stitched, and now so that I don't have to handle them all individually, I'm going to line them up, put those little flat edges together, and I'm going to just stitch across one line straight across to hold them all together. I forgot to point out, for my presser foot, I do have a hand lever back here just like you have on your home machine, but I'm sewing on an industrial machine which also has a knee lifter. So when you see me lift this without using my lever, I have a little cheat here that lets me to do it without my hands. Also, I do not have a back stitch on my machine, so you will see me using the hand wheel more often than you would need to at home. Alright, so let's stitch these together in a straight line, and then we'll work on our spikes. So now our teeth are all together, so it's just one thing to handle. I'm going to put this aside for the time being. We're going to get our spikes and do the same thing. So I'm going to change my thread out to green. I'm going to edge stitch the top and the side of my spike. The bottom does not need to be stitched yet. And then I'm going to do each one, and then I'm going to put them together and just stitch them together so it's one thing to handle. Alright, I've got my spikes all together. I'm ready to sew my spikes into my hood. I'm going to switch to blue thread to match my towel real quick. Alright, we've got our hood. And my terry actually feels softer on one side than the other, so I'm going to switch how mine is folder, so I've got my softer side on the inside. Alright, so we've got our hood. The straight line is going to be where the face is. The fold line is going to be where the back of the head is. So I like my spikes to go this way, where they're kind of pointing away from your face. You could choose if you like it better this way, where that sharp point from the top is closer to your face. You choose which way you like it, and then you're going to fold it upside down and leave it that direction. You're going to open your hood and put it in here. And you have a choice here. You've got a slit that was your center notch. You can center it on there, or sometimes I like to bring my spikes all the way down here to where my hood opens to the center, and that keeps the spikes a little bit further away from the face. So you kind of lay it out and see which way looks better to you. This is how I'm going to do it. Got my spikes all the way back there to the center fold. I'm going to close my hood right sides together over top of those spikes. So you can see I've got my spikes sandwiched in the middle there. I'm going to pin it in place. Yes, sometimes I do pin stuff. So I'm going to pin that in place, and then I'm going to sew it. Now you can put your pins perpendicular to your stitch line, and if you do it where the head of the pin is away from the stitch line, you can sew on top of your pins. That's just not the way I learned how to do it. So I put mine in parallel to my stitch line, and I just take them out. So don't worry, I'm not going to sew over those pin heads. I take them out when I get close to the pin. So this is the way that I do it. You do it the way that you are comfortable with. Alright, we're going to back stitch at each end, sew this whole thing, and you'll see your towel is going to start raveling. Then we're going to cover that seam so it won't ravel anymore. Ah! Broke my thread. Hold on a second. Oh. Alright, I've got my spikes sewn in there. My towel's starting to ravel. This one's not as bad as some of them are. We're going to cover this seam. This doesn't need to look beautiful. We're just going to cover it so that it doesn't ravel anymore. I like to use double fold bias tape. This is called extra wide double fold bias tape. And typically one side, the way it's ironed, kind of sticks out a little bit further than the other side, although I've noticed recently that a lot of times they're totally lined up together. So that's fine, but if one side does stick out a little bit further than the other side, you want to put that longer side on the bottom. And what that does is, while you're sewing from the top side, it gives you a little extra to make sure you're catching on the bottom side. But regardless, it doesn't really matter. What you're going to do is sandwich in that raw edge with your bias tape, and we're going to stitch all the way down. We're going to leave a little tail down here so that we can fold under and make sure even our bias tape does not have a raw edge. This front edge is going to end up getting covered, so you don't have to do anything with it right now other than line it up. So you're going to, again, just fold it over that raw edge, back stitch here. We're going to stitch it all the way down, and then we'll do a little something extra at the bottom. When I get a few inches in, I like to just make sure I'm actually catching on the back. Alright, when I get close to the end, I'm going to leave myself a little tail and clip that off. And we don't even want a raw edge here, just to make sure there's no raveling on the inside. So we're going to take it and fold it inside of itself. And none of this needs to look overly beautiful. We just want to have only finished edges. So now I've got a fold line and a fold line. So nothing here is going to ravel. I'm going to finish all the way out and back stitch at the end. All right, I'm going to check and just to make sure I actually caught it everywhere. Every now and again, I got close to the edge there, but I caught it. Every now and again, I run off the edge and leave a little hole. So if you've done that, you want to go ahead and correct it here. Looks good. All right, so we've got our dinosaur spikes in our hood. So cute. All right, next thing we have our teeth to put in next, but we're going to go ahead and put our bias tape on this front edge before we install the teeth. So that'll be the last ravelly part we have here. So we want another little chunk of our bias tape. So mine really does seem to be pretty even. But again, if you have one side that's longer than the other, you want to put that longer side on the bottom. It just makes sure to give you a little extra to catch the bias tape so you don't end up with a hole. Now, on this one, we're going to go ahead and fold it under first so that we don't have a raw edge even of our bias tape. So we're going to fold just a little tiny bit under, and then we're going to wrap it around that cut edge of our hood. So just like this, and then we're going to sew it all the way across, and we're going to do this exact same thing on the opposite end. All right, at this end, I want to give myself just a little bit to fold under so that I have only finished or folded edges. So I'm going to fold a little bit under and then wrap it over that raw edge, sew to the end, and back stitch. So I'm going to check it, make sure I didn't make any holes. Does not need to look beautiful. This is all going to be on the inside just to make sure that all the edges are finished. All right. Okay, now you're going to get your teeth. We're going to sew our teeth onto our hood. So we have 6 teeth, so we have a center. I'm going to line it up with the center of the hood here. Flip it over so those flat edges are lined up together. It doesn't look very flat because it wants to curve. But those 2 flat edges are going to match and get sewn together. I'm going to pin this so it doesn't shift and get off center. I got myself. Alright, so I'm going to stitch my teeth all the way from one end to the other, back stitch at both ends. I'm going to leave it threaded in blue because this isn't going to show on the outside. Alright, we've got our teeth on there. Now we just need to flip it under and hem it so that they will go down. So we're going to turn it to the inside and just roll this bias tape and stitch it, back stitch at each end, but stitch it all the way across. It's going to get really thick here in the middle with all these seams overlapping. So when you get to this part, you're probably going to need to use the hand wheel and just walk it across. Our dinosaur is taking shape. All right, we're gonna get our eyes ready next. Alright, I have light colored eyes, so I'm actually going to use white thread for mine. If you have a darker color or a brighter color, you may want to match your color thread to the color of your felt. That's up to you. But what we're going to do is line up those straight edges, and we're going to stitch the colored part onto the white part. We're going to go all the way around. So we're going to sew the flat part and the curved part on both eyes. Alright, on your pattern piece you have a marking for the eyes, but what I actually like to do is just place them, eyeball them, but place them on my finished product, and then I can kind of adjust or see if I want them higher or lower, closer together or tilted, or however I think looks good on the actual towel. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to kind of adjust them to where I think they look good and then pin them in place. Alright, I've got mine how I like it. I'm putting the pin right in the center. I'm going to put 2 so that it doesn't wiggle around on me. But I'm going to put the pins right in the center of the eye so that I can sew all the way around without having to unpin it. Now, I don't like hand sewing, so I am going to do this on the machine. If you prefer to hand sew at this part, do whatever works best for you, but you are going to edge stitch again all the way around the eye to secure it onto the towel. So cute. Alright, our dinosaur hood is totally finished. All we need to do now is attach it to the body. So let me switch my thread back to blue, and then I'll show you how we center it and we'll attach it together. Alright, get your body towel. And we're not doing anything to this except attaching the hood to it. So what we're going to do is fold it in half. So get those edges together. And you're going to find the center. So when you find the center, leave it folded. Hold it right here. We're going to do the same thing with our hood. We're going to line those edges up and find the center, and I'm going to show you an easy way to line it up. So we've got them both pinched right at the fold. We're going to put those folds together. Then I'm going to open it and put my fingers on the inside, hold that nice and tight, open the towel up, and now we have it centered on our body towel. So pin this in place so it doesn't shift around. And all we need to do is attach it. Now, this hood is going to have a lot of stress on the edges as your user puts it on their head to dry off every time. So on each end, I am actually going to backstitch and then backstitch again, just to make sure it's very securely attached at the stress point on both ends. There we have our dinosaur towel. I enjoyed sewing this dinosaur hooded towel with you. I hope that you enjoyed it too. Please check out some of my other videos for more DIY projects. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any of them. Or for when you're too busy to do it yourself, be sure to visit my shop for lots of ready-to-ship home decor and holiday items, handcrafted by myself and my husband. You can find me here, there, and everywhere as Belle by Jessi. There's an extra E on the Belle, not on the Jessi.
And also like and subscribe. Yeah, so like and subscribe.
Thanks, boys.